2 pages of next season's balance changes have been leaked, and there are 17 total differences to the guns, and from them 5 are really notable. One is absolutely overpowered in my opinion, and like 3, including that one, are really good. So we are getting at least 5 good changes that will be meta impactful. Others are kind of just improving the weapons, but some of them are just useless. But anyway, what is also very important to keep in mind is that the current meta shows that from the grid, from wildcards, grid is the most used, and most players prefer the mobility, that is lightweight and skulker, as I concluded in my earlier review. And others we do one mobility pack and like flak jacket, which protects from explosions and burning damage, or dauntless. And so it means that the meta is just faster in terms of mobility even this season, and so some of these buffs we will make some aggressive weapons even better, and that is the huge change that I talked about at the start of this video. And now let's dive in. CX9 buff is the absolutely most important one because the burst mag will now have double the ammo. Instead of 12 it will be 24. And that is an absolute huge change. Because as the weapon currently performs, you get one certain kill with the mag. And sometimes if you're lucky you can get it double without reloading if enemies are close one to another. And when the mag doubles, it means that without reloading you will be able to consistently kill 2 players. And sometimes 3 or 4 if we are like stacked up in some closer area, like in some OBG area for instance. So I would say that 4 is an extreme luck, but like 2-3 you will be getting consistently. And being able to just guaranteed kill 2 or sometimes 3 and then reload is a huge change. And I think that in small maps CX9 will be the best gun to use, even better than the USS9. And I don't know if I'm fond of this change, but especially coupled with all the aggression from the loadouts overall, from the mobility with the grid, it will just make the meta super fast and even more challenging than it is right now. Second buff is of course the KRM, because now it will have notably better range, and also the bullet spread accuracy is better, like that pallet distribution, pallet spread. When it is reduced, it just means that we are more centered, more around the main area where you're aiming. So it is essentially bullet spread accuracy for shotguns. And so even now the gun is really good, but after this buff you will be seeing more of them, especially considering, like I said, the aggressiveness of the meta, the CX9 which can one-tap, and now KRM and CX9 we both will be in a very similar niche of usability. But I would say CX9 is probably easier to use with the double mag after the buff. And frankly, it is time to just start playing regular free-for-all shipment this season. Practice using KRM because you will need it in the season. In the season 4 it is now, yeah. The third most impactful buff goes to HVK. It will now have more bullets. Instead of 28 we will be having 32. And it had a similar buff earlier, but later it was removed. Now it's going to be added back. The mag size is getting improved, and it makes the gun easier to use because the biggest downside of the weapon is the 28 bullets mag, because otherwise it is certainly a good meta choice, but takes more skill. And having more bullets allows you to miss more shots and decreases the skill gap. And so then I think it becomes a really valid, maybe even top 3 meta option. And it is actually fast. It has large caliber damage mag with good fire rate and good damage. And there is a high chance that we will be seeing a lot more of HVKs in the season 4, alongside CX9s, KRMs, even the nerf USS9. Like, it fits into the aggressive meta perspective. And even now it is, like I said, a valid meta gun, just it is going to be easier to control, as other stats remain the same. And well, control, like I said, in terms of like missing shots, that you have 4 extra bullets in the mag now. Those 3 buffs were certainly the main, most impactful ones, but in place number 4 in regard of balance changes, I would say that it is Type 25, because it gets a bullet spread accuracy improvement, hit flinch reduction, and the mags that have many bullets will now have better mobility. And it used to be a top-notch meta weapon many seasons ago, but later it got a nerf to hit flinch actually and to BSA. So basically it is being restored and now just will have even better mobility compared to how it was before. And well, the keyboard mobility kind of makes it fit in the whole team of the aggressive meta, but otherwise I'm not yet sure how good will it be in the meta setting, like how good will it perform in the overall meta battles in the ranked lobbies. But it is certainly a nice buff, and like a pretty notable list for Type 25 to be buffed, and was buffed a bit even earlier, but just not as notably well. And I think that we will be able to use it certainly, but will it be like in the meta lists? I'm not sure, probably not, but it will be at least a good non-meta. Or I could be wrong and will be in the meta list as well, because it is not a bad gun. Odin's Colossal Suppressor, first we nerfed the range, now we are giving it back and adding some recoil control. And there are builds that are good even without the Colossal Suppressor, so it is not a must-have, but it just kind of gives more options to the Odin gunsmith building. And Odin, even now, it is certainly a valid meta gun. In the top 2, I would even say, like right under the SS9. So it is a great gun that is getting just more options for gunsmith building. And that is why the changes kind of, it is good, but it is not impactful enough to be in like top 3 changes, for instance. So it is now in place number, I believe, 5 or 6. Well, I mean, this placing it is just to value the buffs. It is not a very important number. So yeah, but it is just lower. It is not a very impactful buff, but a good buff nonetheless. Next buff is the Holger 26, and well, I thought maybe to put it above Odin, but Odin is just a more meta gun as is. Meanwhile, Holger 26 is a good versatile LMG option if you don't want to use the MG42, as MG42 has faster fire rate but the mobility is much slower. And now it will have a better bullet impact, basically will cause a higher hit flinch to the enemies. And it makes it even more valid, especially considering the pacing of the meta, which I predict will be much more fast-paced due to CX9, KRM, HVK, etc. And so it might even be a better option to use instead of MG42, even though statistically, like based on stats, MG42 might be better, but like in actual battle, I think that Holger will be a better choice, as you can be versatile. And it had a mag increasement earlier, so it is not the first buff we are getting in a few last seasons for the Holger. And that is a nice buff. I like the Holger Mythic, so I'm happy about it. And it is a buff that you really need to keep in mind, because like I said, MG42, if it's too slow, just switch to the Holger. RAL MG will have a much better damage, and it actually has potential to be a good usable weapon, but it is a bit on a slower end, which can be an issue, and also there is not a gunsmith that would be like a recommended one. It is not a very used gun right now, so I just leave it here because it has potential, but I'm not sure how good it will be. MX9, basically a stronger, I would say, variant of the Fennec, but with a much smaller mag, gets some buffs to the range as well as the recoil control, and if you want to use it you can. It is a powerful gun even now. But the downside is that, again, the mag is very small. Now, of course, in the fast-paced CX9, KRM, USS9 still being good meta, it could actually be a good choice. But I just don't see much of a point to use it instead of even the Burst CX9 or USS9 or even the Fennec. So it is kind of a powerful gun, but just we have other options that are superior. And then we have one more LMG, and I think that the nail gun is kind of also worth mentioning, but S36 gets some buffs, will be easier to use. Even now it is very smooth in terms of control, the max size is pretty sufficient, but what I found out when trying it out is that basically it is kind of like a weaker variant of Holger 26. So I don't see much of a point to use it, but still it is not a bad gun. Now, nailgun is actually pretty interesting case because it has great mobility, like you sprint with it super fast, but it had only 20 bullets and there is no silencer to put on it. And now it will have same good mobility stats, but extra bullets. And frankly, I tried it out, and those extra bullets they will have an impact. Like you will be able to get an extra kill, maybe even without having to reload, which is super convenient. And the added mobility is great as well, of course. Well, not added, but the mobility that it has. However, now the main question is, do you really want to have a melee that can shoot instead of just using a melee? And the lack of silencer. Because when you're shooting without the silencer, it's obviously shown your location in the minimap and enemies can hear where you are. And is it worth it? Well, I think in the fast-paced meta it could be a great secondary, for instance, to the burst CX9. So you could just switch and finish off some people. And will it be like used in every loadout? I don't think so, but it can be a very helpful secondary to have. Just to add more aggression, more pacing. Now the other buffs are mostly just good in the sense that they are buffs, so something is getting improved, but I just don't see how they would be like meta changing, meta impacting, and they are just improvements, but the guns they need to have more similar improvements in the future to be more notable. And so the main ones, the main takeaways would be certainly CX9, KRM, HVK, Odin still, even though it is even great meta even now, Holger 26, maybe Type 25, RAL S36, they are kind of good. The Nailgun, like I said, is pretty interesting and I will certainly be trying it out. And well, that would be all for the buffs. And the USS9 nerf, it's just 5% less range. And the thing is that even now I'm using a gunsmith that does not have as much range as the most popular, most used one. And usually I simply don't try to kill enemies from a notably long range. And I had no issues, I never really wanted to have extra range with this Cygnus gunsmith, but like, it actually just means that USS9 will most likely get nerfed harder in the future, much like happened with MG42 and BP50, like first nerf was just a bit of a test nerf, and later a more impactful nerf came out, and right now both weapons were usable but just not the peak meta. And after such nerf we might just end up with a meta of CX9 being the best gun. But overall, I'm actually intrigued about the choices of the buffs that are making the meta even faster than it is right now. As even now I would say it is super fast compared to what we had like even 5 seasons ago. And I'm kind of curious to see how it plays out. But one thing is sure that it will be a faster meta even compared to what we have right now.